Imagine a world where the streets of New York belong to no one, where law enforcement has completely abandoned the city, and the smoking ruins are ruled by colorful, brutal gangs. On paper, this sounds like a multi-million-dollar masterpiece of early 80s cinema. But in reality, it was a low-budget, chaotic, and utterly bizarre gamble that defied every single rule of traditional filmmaking. What if I told you that the most iconic version of New York's grittiest borough was actually built entirely in the sun-drenched industrial outskirts of Rome, Italy? Released in 1982, 1990, The Bronx Warriors is far more than just another cult action flick. Directed by the Italian genre maestro Enzo G. Castellari, it remains a fascinating artifact of a unique cinematic gold rush, a time when European filmmakers raced to capitalize on massive American blockbusters like Escape from New York and The Warriors. It is a film that has been mocked, studied, and obsessed over by cinephiles for over 4 decades. Today, we are diving deep into 15 shocking facts about 1990, The Bronx Warriors. We will uncover how a desperate crew navigated production disasters, real-world criminal threats, and a complete lack of a completed script to forge something that became legendary in its own right. And make sure you stick around for number 15, a tragic final reveal that changes everything you think you know about the face of this franchise. Before we head into the ruins of this wild cinematic experiment, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel if you love deep dives into the messy, forgotten corners of entertainment history. Number 1, the shameless birth of a clone. Sometimes a cinematic movement isn't born from creative inspiration, but from pure, unadulterated exploitation. In the early 1980s, American films like John Carpenter's Escape from New York and Walter Hill's The Warriors were conquering global box offices with their grim, dystopian visions of urban decay. Across the Atlantic, Italian producers saw these masterpieces not as art, but as a golden business formula waiting to be duplicated. They rushed director Enzo G. Castellari into a room and gave him a simple mandate: combine both American hits into one script as fast as humanly possible. There was no grand artistic vision at the start, just a desperate race to capitalize on a trend before the market cooled down. It reveals a fascinating truth about the Italian genre film industry of that era. It was a chaotic ecosystem that survived entirely by cloning Hollywood's biggest ideas on a fraction of the budget. Yet, what started as a shameless cash grab would somehow morph into a distinct piece of cult history, proving that even a copy can develop its own bizarre soul. Number 2, The Great Illusion of the Roman Bronx. The movie confidently transports viewers to the year 1990, into a walled-off, lawless Bronx where the government has completely surrendered control to rogue factions. But if you look closely at those crumbling buildings and desolate streets, you are not looking at New York at all. Due to an incredibly tight budget, the production could only afford to shoot in New York for a single week to capture basic wide shots. The rest of this desolate American wasteland was completely faked in the industrial ruins and countryside surrounding Rome, Italy. The crew had to get incredibly creative. They imported specific American vehicles, strategically placed English street signs, and dumped literal truckloads of actual garbage onto Italian roads to mimic Manhattan's grittiest borough. It shows the sheer magic of low-budget filmmaking. You don't need millions of dollars to build a believable world. You just need the right camera angles, a lot of trash, and a director who knows how to lie to the audience beautifully. On screen, it looked like a desperate American nightmare. But just outside the frame, the crew was enjoying regular Italian espresso breaks. Number 3, the accidental fashion of the apocalypse. When viewers remember the various gangs in the film, they usually remember the wild, flamboyant wardrobe that looks like a volatile mix between punk rock and a disco fever dream. This hyper-stylized look wasn't actually the result of a visionary costume designer plotting out the future of fashion. Instead, it was born out of pure economic desperation. The wardrobe department had almost no money to buy new clothes, so they raided local Italian thrift stores and recycled outfits from old, forgotten historical epics stored deep inside Rome's Cinecittà studios. They grabbed football pads, silver spray paint, and leftover leather gear, mixing them together without any logical rules. It highlights how severe limitations often breed iconic pop culture imagery. If the film had a Hollywood budget, the gangs would have looked grounded and realistic. Because they were broke, they created a surreal, unforgettable aesthetic that defined the look of post-apocalyptic B-movies for the rest of the decade. What should have been a costume disaster became the visual signature of a cult classic. Number 4, a leading man who couldn't speak the language. To lead this gritty, action-packed epic, Castellari needed a protagonist who exuded raw, anti-hero energy. He needed his own version of Snake Plissken. He found his star, a 17-year-old named Marco Di Gregorio, lifting weights at a local gym in Rome. Renamed Mark Gregory for international audiences, he had the perfect chiseled jawline and intense gaze for the character of Trash. There was just one massive problem. The young actor did not speak a single word of English, the very language the film was meant to be delivered in. To overcome this, Gregory had to phonetically memorize lines he didn't understand, resulting in an oddly stiff, robotic performance on set. Every single one of his lines had to be completely redubbed by an American voice actor during post-production. It is a stark reminder of how superficial the B-movie industry could be. Actual acting ability and language skills were secondary. All that mattered was how good you looked holding a weapon while walking away from an explosion. And surprisingly, that awkward, silent intensity is exactly what made Trash an enduring icon for camp cinema fans across the world. Number 5, the dangerous reality of real street gangs. When you are shooting an action movie about dangerous street gangs on a shoestring budget, sometimes the line between fiction and reality blurs in the worst way possible. During the brief one-week shoot in the actual Bronx, the production simply could not afford proper Hollywood security teams. To make matters worse, they were filming in highly dangerous, marginalized neighborhoods during the absolute height of New York's early 1980s crime wave. Local gang members quickly noticed the European filmmakers and demanded immediate protection money, effectively threatening to shut down the entire production with violence. Instead of calling the police, director Enzo G. Castellari made a wild, unprecedented decision. He hired the actual local gang members to serve as extras and security guards for his set. This dangerous compromise reveals the raw, unfiltered nature of guerrilla filmmaking in that era. Production wasn't about following strict safety manuals. It was about pure survival. By paying off the real gangs with cash and movie roles, the crew successfully bought their safety. The menacing background extras you see in those New York wide shots weren't actors reading a script. They were the actual, dangerous rulers of those very streets. Number 6, the stolen weapon of a cinematic warrior. Look closely at the iconic weapon carried by Trash throughout his dangerous journey. A heavily modified, futuristic-looking motorcycle. You might think a specialized Hollywood prop department spent weeks designing this central piece of machinery. In reality, the production was so broke they could not afford to build a custom vehicle from scratch. Instead, the crew reportedly found a standard, incredibly cheap Japanese motorcycle and began welding random pieces of scrap metal and household plastic onto the frame. To give it an aggressive, sci-fi edge, they even attached a modified toy machine gun directly to the handlebars. This highlights the hilarious, desperate improvisation behind cult exploitation cinema. They didn't have a team of engineering experts. They just had a guy with a blowtorch, a bucket of bolts, and a tight deadline. Hollywood spent millions of dollars creating the futuristic vehicles of Blade Runner in the exact same era. But Italian filmmakers proved you could achieve cult immortality with some silver spray paint and a trip to a local junkyard. Number 7, the legendary actor who worked for pocket change. Every great B-movie needs a touch of mainstream credibility to help sell the theatrical poster to international audiences. For this film, that credibility came in the form of Fred Williamson, a legendary American action star and former football icon. Williamson played Ogre, the fierce leader of the Tigers gang. Because the producers had burned through most of their cash just getting the crew to New York, they could not afford Williamson's standard acting fee. According to later accounts, the director managed to convince the star to join the film by offering him an incredibly low salary, paired with a promise of absolute creative freedom on set. Williamson accepted, mostly viewing the chaotic Italian production as a fun, paid vacation in Rome. This dynamic highlights a unique era in entertainment history, where aging American stars could extend their careers by becoming kings of European genre cinema. Williamson brought a level of effortless American charisma that the untrained Italian actors simply couldn't match, single-handedly elevating the movie from a forgettable clone into something genuinely entertaining. Number 8. The script that was written on the fly. If you ever feel like the plot of the movie shifts gears erratically from one scene to the next, there is a very good reason for that. The production began filming without a completed script. The writers had delivered a basic treatment outlining the main plot beats, but many accounts suggest that the actual day-to-day dialogue and scene structures were completely invented while the cameras were rolling. If a location fell through, or if an actor didn't show up to the set, Castellari would sit down with his crew over breakfast and rewrite the entire day's plan on a napkin. This chaotic workflow would completely paralyze a modern studio production today. But back then, it was considered a standard operating procedure for independent survival. It shows that the film wasn't guided by a grand narrative blueprint, but by pure, unadulterated momentum. They were building the tracks right in front of a moving train, and somehow, against all mathematical odds, they made it to the final frame. Number 9, the dangerous stunt that almost ended it all. When you are dealing with a low-budget production packed with high-speed motorcycle chases, safety guidelines are often treated as mere suggestions. During a complex chase sequence filmed on a cracked, uneven concrete road just outside of Rome, a professional Italian stuntman completely lost control of his heavy motorcycle while attempting a risky, high-speed jump. The vehicle flipped violently in midair, missing a group of nearby crew members by just a few inches before crashing heavily directly into a primary camera rig. Production ground to a sudden halt, and for several agonizing minutes, the crew feared the absolute worst. Remarkably, the stunt driver survived the impact with only minor fractures, and the camera, though badly shaken, remained fully operational. This terrifying moment exposes the brutal, unfiltered reality of early 80s exploitation cinema. There were no digital visual effects to safely fake the danger, and there were no massive insurance policies to protect the stunt workers. Every single explosion, crash, and dangerous fall you see on that screen was entirely real, executed by brave individuals who regularly risked their lives for pocket change. It gives the action a raw, terrifying edge that modern, computer-generated blockbusters simply cannot replicate. Number 10, the hidden censorship battle in Europe. You might expect a film filled with post-apocalyptic gang violence to face intense scrutiny from strict rating boards. But the real battle happened behind closed doors. Before the film could hit European theaters, various distribution partners expressed deep concern over its highly stylized, relentless depictions of urban warfare. Several countries, including West Germany and the United Kingdom, threatened to slap the movie with a restrictive rating that would effectively kill its box office potential before it even had a chance. To save their financial investment, the producers quietly re-entered the editing room, trimming down several seconds of explicit gore and toning down the audio track during the most intense melee fights. This struggle reveals how independent filmmakers had to constantly walk a fine line between giving hardcore fans the visceral thrills they wanted and satisfying conservative censors. Because of these frantic last-minute edits, multiple different versions of the film existed across global markets, leaving fans to hunt down rare, uncut home videotapes for decades just to see the director's true, unaltered vision. Number 11, the background extra who stole the show. Sometimes the most memorable part of a cinematic experience isn't the main character, but a completely nameless face in the crowd. During the filming of a massive gang summit scene, director Enzo G. Castellari noticed a local Italian extra who had shown up to the set wearing an incredibly bizarre homemade mohawk and a leather vest covered entirely in rusted metal spikes. The man wasn't a professional actor, and he wasn't even supposed to be anywhere near the front of the frame. However, his authentic, intimidating presence was so overwhelming that the director completely changed his camera setup on the fly, placing this nameless extra directly next to the main villains of the scene. This spontaneous decision highlights the beautiful, unpredictable magic of low-budget filmmaking, where you don't always need a meticulous casting director to find the perfect look. By simply embracing the chaotic energy of the people around him, Castellari allowed a random background worker to capture the imagination of audiences, turning a nameless extra into one of the most recognizable faces on the movie's promotional posters. Number 12, the heavy soundtrack that saved the atmosphere. Think about the gritty, dark atmosphere that keeps you fully immersed in this strange, low-budget world. A massive portion of that heavy, futuristic tension doesn't come from the visual effects or the acting, but from the driving electronic soundtrack composed by Walter Rizzati. The producers initially wanted a traditional, grand orchestral score to mimic Hollywood blockbusters, but they quickly realized they simply didn't have the funds to hire a full orchestra. Rizzati convinced them to let him utilize cutting-edge synthesizers and heavy drum machines instead, creating a pulsing electronic soundscape that perfectly matched the dirty industrial environments. This creative pivot completely transformed the identity of the film, proving that a severe lack of money could force a production to adopt a modern, avant-garde style that actually elevated the material. The soundtrack didn't just fill the silence, it became the literal heartbeat of the movie, cementing its permanent place in the synthwave subculture for years to come. Let's pause here for just a moment. If you grew up watching these strange, gritty exploitation films, or if you discovered them much later in life, leave a comment below. Which gang or which wild character from 1990, the Bronx Warriors, stands out the most to you? And if you appreciate these deep dives into the chaotic history of cinema, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Your support allows us to keep unearthing the forgotten stories behind the movies that shaped our collective imagination. Now, let's get back to the final secrets that turned this Italian experiment into an immortal cult classic. Number 13. The strange life of the home video boom. When a movie utterly bombs at the traditional box office, it is usually forgotten, buried under the heavy weight of its own financial failure. When 1990, the Bronx Warriors hit commercial theaters, mainstream audiences and major film critics largely dismissed it as a cheap, ridiculous knockoff of superior American cinema. The theatrical run was incredibly short, and the box office returns were modest at best. However, just as the movie was about to vanish into permanent obscurity, the home video boom of the early 1980s suddenly exploded across the globe. Independent video rental stores were suddenly desperate for action content to fill their empty shelves, and this Italian film found an unexpected second life on the humble VHS tape. This dramatic shift reveals how independent filmmakers managed to bypass Hollywood studio gatekeepers entirely. It didn't matter if you lacked a multi-million-dollar theatrical marketing campaign. If your movie possessed an incredible, explosive cover art and a wild post-apocalyptic premise, everyday people would rent it on a Friday night. The home video market turned a theatrical failure into a massive global rental sensation, proving that a movie's true destiny isn't always decided by theater owners, but by ordinary fans looking for an untamed, late-night cinematic adventure. Number 14. The rapid sequel that nobody expected. In the fast-moving world of Italian exploitation cinema, you do not wait to see if a movie becomes a timeless classic before you start planning the next entry. Before the first film had even finished its international run, the producers realized they had a massive hit on their hands within the emerging home video market. They immediately ordered a direct sequel, titled Escape from the Bronx, which was rushed into active production and released just 1 year later, in 1983. The crew utilized the exact same Italian industrial ruins, brought back director Enzo G. Castellari, and rehired the young leading man, Mark Gregory, to reprise his role as Trash. This breakneck production cycle reveals the relentless assembly line nature of the European B-movie industry during its golden age. They didn't care about narrative depth or complex character growth. They only cared about striking while the market was hot. By cleverly reusing props, locations, and actors, they managed to deliver a completely new action movie in record time, creating a rare, back-to-back cinematic duology that solidified the franchise as a permanent cornerstone of cult exploitation history. Number 15, the tragic disappearance of an overnight icon. And this brings us to the single most shocking piece of the entire puzzle, a dark detail that leaves a haunting shadow over the legacy of this cult classic. Mark Gregory, the young, untrained teenager discovered inside a Rome gym, became an overnight icon for thousands of B-movie fans across the world. He starred in several high-profile Italian action films throughout the 1980s, his face proudly plastered on promotional posters from Europe to America. Yet, as the Italian genre film industry collapsed in the early 1990s, Gregory completely vanished from the public eye. For decades, dedicated fans, film historians, and even his old directors tried to track him down for interviews or conventions, but he seemed to have completely erased his old identity. The tragic reality of his fate only came to light many years later. According to investigative accounts and local Italian records, Gregory had suffered severe financial exploitation by predatory producers during his career, leaving him deeply traumatized and completely broke. He had abandoned acting entirely, moved to a small town, and struggled with severe mental health issues before quietly passing away in relative obscurity. It is a devastating reminder of the human cost behind the flashy, entertaining world of low-budget exploitation cinema. The young man who played the ultimate unbreakable warrior on screen was, in reality, a vulnerable teenager who was used up by the industry and left to fade away in the shadows. When we look at Trash today, riding his modified motorcycle through the ruins, we are not just looking at a campy cult character. We are looking at a fragile piece of human history, frozen in time. When we look back at 1990, the Bronx Warriors, it is incredibly easy to point out every single flaw. The editing is erratic, the dialogue is completely mismatched due to the frantic post-production dubbing, the acting is stiff, and the low-budget special effects are clearly held together by silver spray paint and sheer willpower. But beneath all that cinematic chaos lies something rare and deeply beautiful. It is a testament to an era of filmmaking that simply does not exist anymore. A time when a group of Italian dreamers could look at a massive Hollywood blockbuster, grab some actual trash from a Roman landfill, hire a kid from a local gym, and build their very own version of the apocalypse. The movie is not perfect, but it is alive. It carries the chaotic fingerprints of real people fighting against impossible financial constraints, desperate deadlines, and real-world dangers just to put their wildest fantasies on celluloid. And that is exactly why it refuses to die. If you want me to cover the chaotic behind-the-scenes story of the explosive sequel, Escape from the Bronx, or other forgotten gems from this wild era of exploitation cinema, let me know in the comments below. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in our next deep dive into the messy, glorious history of the films that defined our collective memory.